Good morning, everybody. My name is Meredith Swartz, and I am the purchasing director for DOA, which is Department of Administration. We are a very diverse group. A lot of information that you're going to get today is going to be drinking from the fire hose. And like John and Carla said, we do have breaks in the presentation to answer those questions, but please, this session is for you. Ask as many questions as you need. I'm happy to answer what I can. And then those guys will be answering anything you put in the chat as we go along. I'm with DOA, which is the Department of Administration. We are a very diverse group. We are the business manager for North Carolina. So our department does a lot of things to help not only the state of North Carolina and its constituents, but also the other departments within the state use some of our departments for business needs. So we have advocacy groups first under DOA, which includes the Hub Office. So like John said, I've worked with the Hub Office since I've been the director over here and tried to do everything we can to increase our Hub spend, but more importantly, to make sure Hub vendors know how to bid, how the state works, and how we spend these taxpayer dollars to be able to know where those opportunities are. So we have advocacy groups like the Hub Office, we have Indian Affairs, non-public ed, which is huge now since COVID with all of the private homeschools. And then Council for Women, Youth, and Survivors, which deals with domestic violence and things like that, and human trafficking, women's rights, and youth rights. Then we have asset management groups. We manage all of the state's property in the downtown area with facility management. We have state construction, which is underneath us. And when we go through the rules and the laws that govern how we buy, we're going to talk a little bit about state construction, which is different than what we do in purchasing for goods and services. But we'll look at those different rules. But state construction is one of the departments under DOA. So if state construction needs to buy something for state construction, they would come through my office. We have state parking. We manage all the parking decks in the downtown area that the state owns, and state property. So state property manages all of our leasing property and real estate needs for across the state. We have some state services. These are the services that help the other agencies within the state do their business. So one is the Mail Service Center. We're going to talk about today some mandated resources that we must use. And some of these state services are things that we have to go to first before we go out to the vendor community. So Mail Service Center does all of our direct mailings, including like your DMV little registration card and things like that, all would go through our Mail Service Center. Motor Fleet manages all of our fleet vehicles for the state, including highway. And purchase and contract writes the rules and the laws, the rules of how we buy and spend these state money. So state purchase and contract is the overall governing authority, and we'll get into what they do as far as approving what the different departments do. But they are a division of DOA. So if purchase and contract needs to buy something, they would come through my office. However, when I buy things over my delegations, I go to them for final approvals. State and federal surplus property are our state trash man. We will get into, when we talk about our mandated resources, how you can benefit as a starting out business or a small business. You can go to federal and state surplus property to get equipment and needs and things like that, but they're one of our mandated resources. We have a couple of additional departments that are smaller departments within the state that we also manage and do bids for and do purchasing for, which is State Board of Elections, State Human Resources, Lieutenant Governor, and Military and Veteran Affairs. So in all of these different groups are who DOA buys for. And as you can see, we buy very many different things as far as we could do something like boiler maintenance for facility management. We buy vehicles for motor fleet, or we could do consultant service for the Hub Office. So very different, diverse things that we buy. And a lot of the departments function that way, where we buy many, many different areas and different commodities and things like that. So the topics of our courses today are going to be going over the rules of state procurement, We're going to talk about registering to do business with the state. If you are a hub vendor, you are already registered to do business with the state. We're going to talk about e-procurement and how that system works. I think we got somebody. Can we mute? There we go. We're going to talk about the different purchasing methods we use and the different systems and how we get those bids out. We're going to talk about how we seek competition, how we find the vendors to do the work. And then we're going to talk about the different solicitation methods. So we're going to go through the different documents and what could be in those documents and how to respond to those documents. We're going to talk about the different evaluation methods. So when we get back our bids, how do we award? And then if awarded, how does that happen and what comes next? And then some contract monitoring on the back end once you have an award. So a lot of information today. Ask those questions in the chat window, and we'll stop at the end of each one of these sections and kind of see if there are any questions. But in the meantime, Carla and John will be helping to answer those questions in the chat window. All right, so first we're going to talk about the rules and the laws. We're going to talk about the difference between goods and services and how those affect what we're buying, the types of contracts we have, and then the delegations that drive our policies and procedures. So we talk about the monies that we're spending. We're talking about taxpayer dollars. We're talking about your money and my money and everybody else's money that we're spending. So we want to make sure that there are rules and procedures and policies that are put in place so that we can justify how we are spending those dollars. So it starts with the legislature and the North Carolina general statutes. Those are those laws that are written by the legislature to govern how those tax dollars are spent. From there, state purchasing contract, and I'm going to talk about DIT today, which is Department of Information Technology. They are a separate group from purchasing contract. They have their own administrative code. So we have Goods and Services Administrative Code for purchase and contracts, and then we have a DIT administrative code for information technology purchases. But both of those administrative codes take the laws and actually write procedures and rules that pertain to those, how we spend those dollars. From there, there is a North Carolina procurement manual, which takes those rules and laws and puts it into procedure-wise. How do we manage the approvals? Where do those documents go? What are our retention records? All of that is within the manual. Then each agency has their own procurement manual that manages how we do those small purchases, how we manage within our agency our retention records, how do all of our purchases happen. So nothing can supersede what's above it, but we can get into the weeds of what a purchasing manual at an agency level can be. Most of what I talk about today is all at the North Carolina procurement manual at the higher level. Anything that you see highlighted in yellow in this presentation is particular to DOA's agency purchasing manual. So when we go through, I'll call that out, but you'll see it highlighted in yellow. Most of the rules are the same for most all of the state agencies, most all of the cabinet agencies. There are some different rules for universities, community colleges, and municipalities. When we talk about travel, all of our travel procedures are under the budget manual. So when we're talking about that governing authority and where those general statutes and the administrative code, we've got purchase and contract. If y'all want to fall asleep, these are great reads. Statutes, purchase and contract, goods and service purchases are under Chapter 143, Article 3, and the Administrative Code, Title 1, Chapter 5. Information technology purchases. When we talk about information technology purchases, we're talking about anything that touches data. This has come up a lot more recently because a lot of things have a software element to it that didn't have years ago. So something like even your HVAC systems could have some kind of software element that then throws it into being an information technology purchase. So once it does become an information technology purchase, those general statutes of 147 and the Administrative Code Title 9, Chapter 6 come into effect for that purchase. State construction has its own set of procurement rules. So anything that is considered state construction projects, which we'll get into where we're talking about the alteration of an actual building, physical properties, if we're looking at moving wiring, moving walls, anything like that can become a state construction project. Those general statutes are Chapter 116, 143, and 153, and state construction has their own procurement manual. So today, when we're talking about rules, we are talking about goods and services and DIT purchases.
Meredith, for some reason you went on mute.
Sorry about that. Yep. We have 28 state agencies. We have 58 community colleges in North Carolina, 16 public universities. We have over 2,500 public and charter schools, 100 counties, and 500 plus municipalities. And when we go through these rules, the ones that we are focused on.
It has.
Sorry.
Yes.
Yep, somehow I clicked here. Okay, so 28 state agencies are who we're talking about the rules today. However, in saying that, a lot of the same rules affect the community colleges, the universities, and the public charter schools. A lot of the municipalities and counties have their own set of rules, but they all still post in the same site. So when you're looking for those opportunities, a lot of the charter schools and the counties and municipalities all post out on, you're going to hear me talk about IPS, which is our interactive purchasing system. All of those, just these different entities all still post in the same areas to find those opportunities. So we're talking about those 28 state agencies. This is the list of the 28 state agencies. Carla is going to send out this presentation to all the members that are on this call today. She's also recording it, but in this list, this is where all of the state agencies and the rules that we're going to talk about, these are all the different state agencies. We all buy a lot of the same types of products. Everybody needs office supplies. Everybody needs vehicles, things like that. But there are some very unique things that these departments buy too. These are the cabinet agencies, which we are a member of. And then there's council agencies such as agriculture and insurance and treasury. And then there's some support agencies, which if you look at this list, some of those support agencies are the ones that fall up under DOA for their procurement needs, such as Board of Elections and Office of the Governor and Lieutenant Governor and things like that. So what happens first? Somebody comes up and says, I need to buy something. So purchasing, by the time it gets to us, we start asking the questions. We're like, why do you need this? What are you trying to buy? How much does it cost? Does your division have funding? You wouldn't believe how far we would get, and then there's no money. But we want to make sure first, is there money to buy it? Then we talk about how are we going to buy it? What are the procedures? And then we're going to talk about what do we need to document that we're spending those taxpayer dollars wisely. So we are the paper people that we ask for all the documentation, and because everything we do in purchasing becomes public record. So anything that you have under contract, you have gotten a purchase order from that you want to see, we're going to go over later on this morning, how to look up those public records. How do I go and see how I did on a bid? All of that is documented. Everything in state procurement is documented. Purchasing procedures are determined by two things. What are you trying to buy and how much money is it? That's what drives how we are going to buy whatever it is that we're buying. We're going to talk about there are different procedures for goods versus services. We have mandated resources that we have to use. And then we have what's called open market. So if none of those mandated resources that the state agencies have to buy off of can meet our needs, that's when we go out for open market, reach out to the vendor community for those quotes, those bids, those proposals, whatnot. It's called open market. Delegations is just how much money is spent. We have different tiers of those delegations that drive our procedures. And then there's always special circumstances because everything in purchasing is gray. There's always some kind of proprietary things and stuff like that. So goods versus services, what's a good? A good is commodities, supplies, something tangible. Know that any goods purchases, the vendor is charged 1.75 e-procurement fee. That's only on.
Meredith, you went on mute.
Weird. Okay. We'll go over why we are getting charged that 1.75 fee. So goods can be vehicles, office supplies, things like that, tangible property. Services are those intangible work where we are contracting with a vendor to provide a service that has specialized knowledge, experience, or similar capabilities to provide a service. It could be something like plumbing, to power washing, to consultant service, anything like that is a service. That any PO that's put in that is under a service commodity code will not be charged that 1.75 fee in e-procurement. So mandated resources. So when we first say, hey, I got to buy something, our first stop is we got to consider these mandated state resources. We have mandatory state term contracts that are written by statewide purchase and contract and statewide Department of Information Technology purchasing. Mandatory state term contracts are mandatory for state agencies to use. The universities can use them, and I believe the community colleges, they were on the fence. I'm not sure if they did change over to where they have to use them, but those state term contracts, the whole purpose of them is that the PNC and DIT do reviews of what we buy and decide that all state agencies buy things like office supplies. So they write a contract with a vendor that can supply office supplies for the entire state. Then we don't have to go out and get the quotes for it. We don't have to do all the work for it. That mandatory state term contract is already written, and we can buy off those state term contracts. There are state term contracts that are convenience contracts as well, that we don't have to use, but are out there for us to use if we would like to. Mandatory state term contracts for PNC and DIT are on their website. Both of them, and all of the websites that I referenced today are in the back of this presentation. But the state term contracts are on DIT or PNC's website. You can look through there. They also go out for bid just like every other contract. So you can bid on state term contracts to be able to service the whole state. They go out, they have a term that expires, and at the time of expiration, they'll put it out for bid. Some of the DIT contracts have continuous open bidding, where you can continually add vendors to those state term contracts. A lot of them have multiple vendors on them. So if you're interested in any of the state term contracts, you can go out to their website. The most important thing is there's a list, but within that list, there are actually the contact to the contract manager. So if you have any questions about one of those state term contracts, you can call that contract manager or email them directly and ask your questions about that particular state term contract. The next mandated resource we have is Correction Enterprises. This is a department or a division of our adult corrections department. Now they have broken off from DPS. This is managed by the prison system. So while the state's prisoners are incarcerated, they learn a skill so that they take that skill to be able to go out into the community. Correction Enterprises offers us framing a lot of our furniture. They produce all of our desks and our office chairs and things like that. They also have print services for us. They're a little limited, but before we go out for that open market, we have to see, does Correction Enterprise offer what we need? Federal and state surplus property, like I said, are our state's trash van. They take all of our used property and resell it. So know, as a small business, if you need desks, computers, phones, any kind of vehicles, all kinds of things, federal and state surplus property are over off of Chapel Hill Road in the Raleigh-Cary line. You can go out there any day of the week and go buy used property that you could use if you're trying to set up an office or as an individual, period. And they have auctions for their larger items out there. So you can check out their website as well. Mail Service Center, like I said, does all of our mass mailings. State Construction Office. So if we are renovating a building, we're building, that becomes a state construction office. Those procurements follow state construction rules. They will not fall under the same rules and laws that govern how we buy for goods and services. State Property manages all of our leased property, so they go out and negotiate our leases and things like that for leased property. And then if we have the means to work within the state with other state agencies or nonprofits, we write contracts called memos of understanding or MOUs. So those MOUs don't go through standard procurement processes. They're written between the two agencies or between the state and the nonprofit to outline the deliverables and all of that. And they're written by the actual agency and do not fall under the standard procurement rules. So those are some mandated things that before we go out to the open market, we got to make sure that none of these meet our needs first. When we talk about those state term contracts, the contracts are established. We've got P&C and DIT both for all agencies to use unless we're exempt by some kind of statute. They can be mandatory or convenient. There is that searchable list on their website that also has the contract manager. The whole point of the state term contracts is that they're able to pull that data and analyze it to say, we buy many more widgets than we do this thing. So we're going to it's able to negotiate those prices, get better quality products and shorter delivery times for everyone within the state. So we talked about the open market delegation. So none of our mandated resources work, and now we're going out to the vendor community. Every state agency, university, and community college has a delegation, a general delegation, where everything under that, the agency can complete the process from start to finish and doesn't have to have extra approvals. Everything over that delegation has to be approved by statewide P&C if it's just a standard in goods and services, or Department of Information Technology if it is a DIT purchase. Our overall right now, our delegation is $50,000 for goods and services, or DIT $5,000. So anything under $50,000 can be handled start to finish within my office, and anything over that has to go to P&C before we can post our solicitation and before we can award the contract. And for DIT, that number is $25,000. So, and as you see, that was highlighted in yellow, and this is our overall delegation authority for DOA. Most of the agencies, state agencies, have kind of the same for the over 50,000, because that's where a lot of us are at our general delegation. But when it comes to these smaller purchases, every agency can be different in their rules and procedures for smaller purchases. But for us at DOA, if you have a P card and you are buying something for under $1,000, now this is open market, so none of those mandated resources, it's not on state term contracts, it's not on those type of things. But if you're going out to buy something for under $1,000, they can use their P card. If it's under $25,000, we consider it a small purchase. At DOA, our hub plan, we have made it to where if it is a small purchase under $25,000, we require one quote, as long as that quote is from a hub vendor. They can get that one quote, cash it in e-procurement, and move forward. There is no competition requirements for under $25,000 as long as we meet our hub efforts. If they can't find a hub vendor to do whatever it is or to buy whatever they're finding, we have to document our hub efforts. And then they have to go out and get 3 quotes from the vendor community. But as long as that first quote is from a hub vendor, they can move forward. When we get in the realm of over 25,000 is now over our small purchase. From 25 to 50, we have to get 3 quotes, but one of those quotes has to be from a hub vendor. It also requires the vendor to sign the terms and conditions of doing business with North Carolina. So we document that quote on a formal document. We will go through all these different types of solicitation documents on either an RFQ, which is a request for quote, or there's an informal PDF document that's just a small 4-page document for goods. But this is informal competition. We send that document out. The vendor agrees to the terms and conditions, and then we go with the lowest vendor out of those 3. And one of those quotes has to be from a hub vendor. Then once we get over 50 grand, which is our general delegation, that's where we get into formal bid. So formal bids for P&C goods and services have to be approved before we post it and before we award it. So those formal competition bids take a little bit longer. We're going to go through all of the different procedures that have to happen with formal bids, where they're posted, and all of that. We talk about the informal competition, the small purchase and the micro purchase. If our individual, I always say the guy that turns the wrench, the guy at facility management whose boiler's broken, he needs to go out and get quotes. He needs to find those vendors to get those quotes from. He uses the EVP system, which is where vendors register to do business with the state. If you are a hub vendor, you are already registered in the EVP, but that's where he finds those vendors, reaches out directly for those quotes for those small purchases. But anything over 50 grand becomes formal competition that's actually posted out on our system for anybody to be able to bid on. For IT purchases, anything under 5 grand, we consider a small purchase. We go get 1 quote and we move forward. From 5 grand to 25,000, because that's our general delegation for DI, we get 3 quotes and move forward. Nobody has to sign terms and conditions with IT purchases until we get into the formal competition. So anything over 25,000 is considered formal competition and requires security reviews, DIT approval before posting an award. And DIT formal competition doesn't happen quickly because it has to make sure it meets our security reviews. Any contracts that we have are over $1 million, that we estimate to be over $1 million, require legal review. And that review happens before posting and before award. We're going to talk about the different types of contracts here. We have a standard term contract, which is just an agreement to buy those commodities or services at certain prices under standard stipulated terms and conditions. We have agency-specific term contracts, which work like our state term contracts, where there's an indefinite quantity. We're not guaranteeing any minimums or maximums. We're able to use those contracts and those prices we award based on what we bought in the past and the vendor's rates for either a commodity or a service. We do these a lot for some of our things that used to be emergencies. So we have many generators that are downtown Raleigh, and right now, emergency and a generator goes down, it includes the rental of the generators, the maintenance of the generators, and the repairs of the generators on an as-needed basis. But we award that vendor under contract, so it includes how quickly they have to respond and things like that, so that then they are the vendor to do generator maintenance for DOA property. All contract terms under either a good or a service contract is a standard of 3 years that can be awarded by the agency. Some contracts can be longer than that. Just if they got approvals before it was posted, and we had to justify why that longer term. The standard is 3 years term. Often it's 1 year term with renewals, and those options are up to the state whether they want to exercise those options. When we talk about service contracts, we have just a contractual service, which is just mean that we're contracting with a vendor that has that specialized knowledge or skills or experience or whatnot to do a service over a certain period of time. It could be anything as simple as janitorial, something as hard as training instruction. Anytime that we're just contracting with a vendor to provide us a service over a term is just a contractual service contract. Where it gets a little different is for consultant service. So these contracts are where the vendor is going to come and assess one of our programs, and they are going to provide their expertise, their professional qualifications on improvements or how that was working. They could do an analysis, reporting on how your program is working and how we can implement those improvements. If they never get to the implementation stage, they're just providing their expertise, then we call that a consultant service. All consultant services, no matter how much money they are, must be approved by the governor's office, and that is so that we make sure we can't provide those services within a different state agency. So we want to make sure before we go out to open market that can't be provided by one of the universities. People have, universities at your need that can do assessments and things like that. Any of the vendor that is receiving payment for services over $600, you must submit that 1099. You will get the 1099 form. Just know that we might need a substitute W-9 for it. So we talked a little bit about DIT purchases. Just know that they're under the general statutes. IT purchases include hardware, software, online service subscriptions, license agreements, but anything that touches data. So we have a lot of things that are becoming DIT purchases because the vendor is getting, we're not buying your system, but maybe we're giving you our data to manage. So that then has a technology expert where we want to make sure that where you're putting our data is secure. So it does have to go through those security reviews to become a DIT purchase. Statewide DIT, they approve all of those purchases that fall under that area before and after, before posting and before award. They have their state term contracts. We have one for software, hardware, telecom. We also have an IT services contract where we buy a lot of the web designers and things like that. That is one of those contracts that's continuous open bidding, I believe, where they continually to add vendors to that contract. And I know there's a lot of hub vendors on that contract because we are able to pull those numbers separately. But it's all under a state term contract. We do, for those security reviews, you will be asked to provide a VRAR, which is a vendor readiness assessment report, or a SOC 2 report. That's where your data's held, how you held it, how it goes, is it on premise or off premise. So those are documents that if you're providing a DIT bid, know that you may have to look through there and see, do I have to go out to the link to pull down the VRAR and submit it with my proposal? Do I have to submit my SOC 2 report with my proposal? It's a DIT procurement, there very well could be asking for those two documents. Like I said, there's always something special in procurement. We know that there are things that are sole source. We do have a list in the code, so in those rules, that are authorized as a waiver of competition. The biggie ones that we usually see are that it's a sole source, sole proprietary something. It could be brand specific. It has to be this brand because we already have this piece. It could be an emergency. The building is flooding and I had to get the plumber out and stop the water. Those are emergency purchases. It could be standardization. I already have this piece and I need this piece to fit into it. So it needs to be a standard bought from this particular vendor. It could be where this vendor's already done all of this work under one contract. Now this scope is outside of that scope, but he couldn't do this scope if he had not done this scope. So it could be an ongoing job or task to waive that competition. like I said, if you really want to fall asleep, there's the code that you can go out and read. You can just Google any of our general statutes, our codes, things like that manage those rules. And there is a list of the waivers of competition. So I'm going to stop there and see if we have any kinds of questions.
And so the one question we have so far is pertaining to contracts that utilize vendors who offer life coaching or training for things like discovering life purpose, dealing with relationship issues, mindsets, and life in general. And so the question is, where would contracts like that be found?
So I'm assuming maybe DHHS, even our Council for Women or Indian Affairs, like our advocacy groups do a lot of but counseling for members of the community. So that could be something where you could reach out directly to, I would Google the advocacy groups in North Carolina and see if you just reach out and touch them and say, hey, this is what I provide. And we're going to get into how to be able to find those contacts, where to look, and all of that. But that could be, just off the top of my head, would be a good start to maybe do those types of services. Also, our HR department. I mean, anybody within the office of, which is OSHR, Office of State Human Resources, maybe they could benefit that. And then every single department has an HR department. So just when you're looking at what you do, just really think about look at that list of the different state agencies and say, where could I fit in to that list of state agencies? And like I said, everybody has an HR department. Everybody pretty much has a facilities department, things like that. So just see where you can fit in for some of that.
And so that was the only question in our chat. And it looks like I have a hand raised by Mike T. Mike, if you have a question, you can unmute and ask.
Good morning. My name is T. My last name is Mike. Thank you.
Sorry.
No worries. Earlier in the segment, when you were talking about the different pockets of agency contracts and surplus and all of that, you mentioned that for state term contracts, I think it was state term contracts, you can go out to a website and see all of the contracts with the end date and all of that.
Yeah.
What website is that? I did not see a website.
We're going to get to it. It's in the back of this presentation. I'm going to show you all the websites that I talk about today.
Got you. Thank you.
Yep. And like I said, Carla will send this presentation out to you after the session.
Okay, thank you.
And it does look like a couple of additional questions came in.
Okay.
Right after Carla said there's no more questions.
Okay.
So there was a similar question. Is there a vibrant history of contracts awarded to content production companies, videography, film, drone, photography?
I know of at DOA. However, I don't know if state construction could do some of those types of things, maybe. So like I said, we'll get to where to be able to find those people to contact. I would assume like construction, maybe even state property would use those types of services. So just look at the department list, I think is my best example. And then within every department has a website, and you can get into the divisions of that department and to be able to see where whatever service or goods you provide, where it could fit into those different areas.
Right, and I think there's like 3 more questions, but we might be able to put one of those off a little bit. So one of them is, do we contact the governor's office for consulting with needs approval?
No, purchasing would contact the governor's office for those approvals. So when it comes to us to start the process to finalize the procurement, one of the steps of finalizing and approving that procurement is going to the governor's office and saying, this is what we're trying to buy. can we go out to the open market and get it?
Okay. Next question, are foreign entities with certifications from another state allowed to bid on these North Carolina contracts?
It's up to the individual contract. Most of them, I would say yes, but there could be certain types of contracts. It would just be something that would be written into that solicitation document. And we're going to go through your most valuable tool when you're talking about formal bidding is the question and answer period. If you have any questions concerning that particular procurement, that is your time to ask it, and they have to give you an answer. So use that, and we're going to talk about that in depth in a little bit. But yeah, that's one of those questions that would be particular to every particular procurement, because there are some things that I would say some of our DIT stuff cannot be done overseas. So it would be particular to the particular procurement. Yeah.
And the last one, what about specific interests in subcontracting and teaming opportunities?
So that again is one of those things that's particular to the particular procurement, because there are some things that you can't subcontract out. But on the norm, I would say, yes, you can subcontract out some pieces of a particular contract. I know like our janitorials, you cannot sub out the general cleaning, daily cleaning has to be done by your company, but the glass cleaning can be done by a sub, or the floor maintenance where they have to come in and wax the floors can be done by a sub. So that again is one of those things that's particular to that particular procurement. Just look out for those words, can subcontractors, and if you have a question, ask it during the question and answer period. Yeah.
Thank you, Meredith. That was the last question that I see in the chat.
All right, I'm gonna get into doing business with the state. We're gonna talk about our e-procurement basics. We're going to talk about how to register with EVP, and we're going to talk about our upgrade that happened to e-procurement in 2020, which now has been about 3 years, but it did change up a few things. When I talk about EVP, know that there is an upgrade happening to EVP, which is happening in July. So we're almost there. I train next week on it. When we talk about e-procurement, so e-procurement is our entire system, our purchasing system. It allows for electronic ordering by most state agencies. I think all of the state agencies except for DOT uses e-procurement, and that even might be changing here shortly. E-procurement provides a single point of access to all of the government organizations. That is what produces your purchase orders. That is where the collaborative requisitioning is. We'll talk about that. And it links to EVP, which is where you register to do business with the state, IPS, which is where we post bids with the state, and then the system that produces once it touches our accounting system to be able to encumber funds and produce those purchase orders. Many of those state term contracts have uploaded searchable catalogs within the system for easy purchasing access. So something like our office supplies. When we go into e-procurement as a requisitioner, we can go say, I need to buy pens. It links me to FSI, which is the current and has been for many years, who is a hub vendor, reaches out to their website. Within the e-procurement system, we're able to add to our cart, just like you're buying off of Amazon, and then it takes it back into e-procurement to finish the requisition that goes through the approval flows to become a purchase order. So a lot of those state term contracts have searchable lists for us within the system. Vendors are charged a 1.75 fee for goods only. So when we talk about e-procurement, we're going to get into commodity codes. Any of the codes that are set for goods get charged that 1.75 fee for support of the e-procurement system. So why are you required to pay that 1.75 fee? It allows us to do business electronically. It takes away from doing taxpayer dollars. It pays for the system and all of the support that goes along with it. It also helps pay for the help desk and things like that. The vendor is able to market your business. When you sign up for EVP, it is free. And so therefore, it allows you to be in that searchable list for us to find those vendors to meet our needs. So how do you benefit for e-procurement? It's increased access to us, because that's where our lists are that we find our vendors. It's a single point of access to the state agencies, to public schools, to community colleges, to some of the universities. It's an increased order accuracy. It allows for us to add comments. It allows for us to attach your quote that you sent us so that you can see that. It allows to make sure that the accuracy of the order matches a contract. It allows for us to upload the executed contract and all of that within the system. It's potential for cost savings on your area because you wouldn't have to market to us or the administrative cost. It's an automatic email system that generates a PO that directly goes to you electronically. Just know that it's going directly to however you are registered in e-procurement, in EVP. So we're going to get into EVP and how to update your information too. In 2020, we got an upgrade to e-procurement. It now is a cloud-based system instead of an on-premise system, which allows for a lot more security and things like that. We started using the UNSP commodity codes. UNSP SC commodity codes are nationwide commodity codes that are actually 8-digit codes. E-procurement only uses the first 6 digits. So when we talk about those codes, any codes that end in 7, 8, or 9 are service codes. Those codes do not have the 1.75 fee attached, but anything under 7 is that 1.75 fee. It will behoove you that when you are giving a quote, if you have shipping costs, which need to be included in your quote, shipping is a service. So if you are shipping a commodity, just pull the shipping cost, make it a separate line that then would be under a 7, 8, or 9 commodity code. EVP registered vendors are automatically transitioned into the new system when we did the upgrade, and there is a searchable list for those commodity codes. When you register EVP, you pick the commodity codes. It's up to the vendor to pick the commodity codes that are associated with what you do. There is a searchable key list at the unspsc.org. That's the 8-digit. That gets into the real weeds of I do this. When you currently are registered with EVP, you are at a 4-digit of registration. So you get a lot of opportunities because whatever you register under is going to give that alert. What we post is posted under commodity code. So if you're registered under a 4-digit commodity code, you get a notice that that was posted. And we'll get into all of that. But the commodity codes are very important that you pick the right commodity codes so that you're getting the right notice for things and opportunities that are posted. In the new EVP system, you will be able to register not only at the 4-digit, but up to the 6-digit, which is wonderful because you'll be able to more get into the weeds of what you actually do. It will help us find the vendors that actually do the work, and it will help you weed out kind of those opportunities that you have no interest in. There is vendor training on all the upgrades, new features, including EVP, out on the e-procurement website. There's training on how to register. There's training on e-procurement. There's training on everything and all the new features at that website right now. When we talk about EVP is free to register. When you registered as a hub vendor, one of the steps to become a hub vendor is to register with EVP. It's an automated business opportunities based on those commodity codes in which you pick because it is associated also to IPS. The new EVP, IPS is going to be transitioned away. All of the bid opportunities will be attached to EVP. So where you're registered, you'll be able to see opportunities. it'll be associated, and you will get automatic notices for those commodity codes that you have selected. It is up to you to keep your information updated. I can't stress how important it is for you to go into EVP and make sure that your email is up to date. We push out, even when we post, one of our hub plan at DOA is that we reach out directly to hub vendors to say, hey, we just posted this. We posted one the other day where we had 35 emails that came back that said they were undeliverable to hub vendors. So please go into EVP and make sure that if you had some salesman register you that's no longer there, that you are still getting those notices to know of those opportunities. Know that that email also is who receives purchase orders. So if we buy something directly under a quote, and the only way for you to get that purchase order is for it to be sent directly to however and whoever is registered under your company in EVP. The IPS notifications, the formal bid notifications are all sent and reside in EVP. It's also what we use for our vendor search. So if we're going out to do these small projects and we're looking for our hub vendors to get our one quote from in EVP to say, I want to see only hub vendors that provide sheetrock and able to get us a list to get those quotes from. So to start the process, to be able to register with EVP, like I said, if you're a hub vendor, you're already registered, but you only need internet access, your federal tax ID or your EIN, and then a valid email address. And the certification process for hub vendors is going to be within the new EVP system as well. This is the link to be able to log into EVP. If you need to register now, you can register through that link. If you need help doing any of your registration, you can call the help desk. If you somehow are locked out or you had somebody else register you and you need to update and you're having trouble getting in, call the help desk. They're available 7:30 to 5:30, Monday through Friday. This is their phone number. This is their email address to be able to help you get access to how you are registered to do business with the state. So like I said, EVP is getting ready to be upgraded. There's a lot of information on the upgrade on PNC's website and also on the e-procurement website on what is happening with the new upgrades. It's all dropping the 1st of July. So a lot of all that information will be coming. It's sent to the email address that you are registered in EVP. So it would behoove you right now to go into EVP and make sure that your email address is up to date for your registration. Any questions on EVP or e-procurement?
So for some reason, my chat is not loading. And so John or Angela, if there are questions that haven't been answered, if you would let me know, let us know what those are.
I don't see any new chat questions or comments.
I don't either. All right, we'll push forward. All right, so we're going to talk about our different purchasing methods. We're going to actually, this is really our hub program section. I'm going to go over what DOA's hub efforts are and how we have tried to increase our hub spend and all of our efforts that we do. We're going to talk about hub certification. I'm going to kind of breeze through that because I think the majority of everybody on this call is already a hub vendor, but that information will be in this presentation at your leisure to be able to review, to be able to become hub certified. But we're going to talk about the hub program. So the hub program was instituted with Executive Order 25 and General Statute 143-128.2. The goal for goods and services and construction services all is 10%. That is our aspirational goal to meet. All of the hub vendors, when you're registered in that EVP, you are marked as if you are hub certified, and that way we can search. I want to see just hub vendors that provide this service, and that way that's who I'm getting my quotes for in an effort to meet our 10% goal. So for DOA, this is yellow. This is DOA's hub plan. So we've done a couple of different things. When I first came on as the officer, we would look at our hub spend and it was not great. And so I worked with Tammy Hall, who is now moved on to Durham County, but worked with the hub office directly to try to see where our efforts are, see where we could fall, and see how we could increase our spend. So first, we talked about adding hub language to all of our solicitation documents that go out. So we were the first at DOA to add an attachment in the back of these documents that asks, one, are you a hub vendor? So we could capture that spend. Do you identify as a hub vendor? Are you a woman, minority-owned, disabled-owned business owner, that we can get you hub certified before we cut any POs to make sure and capture that spend. And then we also ask, you were talking about subcontractors earlier, tier 2 hub vendors. So maybe somebody is the main prime vendor, but we ask, do you have any subs, and what is the percentage or the dollars of this particular contract that will be going to hub vendors? And then we can add that to our spend numbers as well. We at DOA, we're able, I think this is the biggest thing that we changed, is that we project our upcoming opportunities and we push that out to the hub office so that they can reach out and help us find vendors. We have an annual departmental procurement plan. And by the way, the hub language that's in solicitation now is across the board. Everybody has that attachment. All universities, community colleges, and state agencies have that attachment in the back of their solicitation documents now. But as far as projecting the upcoming opportunities, every month I produce a report that says, these are the things that we are currently getting ready to put on the street. So reach out, see if you can find anybody. Then within my office, I have a hub liaison, and she reaches out to the hub community, to all those vendors that are registered under the commodity code, and says, hey, I have this thing that's getting ready. The DOA, Department of Administration, has this bid that is coming. Is this something that your company would be interested in bidding? And if you do, reply to this email, and then we generate our own list to solicit directly to once it's posted. So with that, we have definitely increased our hub spend on the back end from our direct solicitations to the hub community. We give notice, we notify the hub office once we post, we notify those individual direct solicitations, and the hub office also posts our solicitations on their website. So with all of this, we have definitely increased our hub spend. We do have Motor Fleet, which right now doesn't have a hub vendor on that mandatory state term contract for vehicles. So that kind of affects our spend with the state term contracts. But if you look at our spend where our hub plan takes effect and these procedures have taken effect, we are well over 10% every single quarter. So I'm very proud of that we have moved on into the generation and making that effort, and it definitely shows in our hub numbers. This is our plan. So the big take effect was that rule that says if it's 25,000 or less, I want that quote from a hub vendor. And so when we go out to open market, if you have one quote and it's from a hub vendor, we move forward. Pretty much everything that we have that's a small purchase, I would say definitely out of facilities, definitely out of some of our other agencies, definitely out of the hub office, things like that. That one quote is always from a hub vendor. Then we require that when we go out and get those 3 quotes, one of them has to be from a hub vendor. And then when we go out for formal bid, we do that direct solicitation. And then we ask that question, are you a hub vendor? Renewals of our contracts, we ask again, are you a hub vendor? Because maybe that status has changed. So we do that at the time of renewal to be able to add that time into and get down into that second tier. So the certification process, like I said, I'm not going to go through this. Just the biggest thing to take away is that the vendors must recertify every 4 years. So if you are a hub vendor, know that the hub office will be reaching out to you with the email address that you're a registered EVP to recertify. Make sure you keep your certification up to date. You get so many great opportunities like this class. They do how to find capital. They do all kinds of different seminars and conferences and things like that to help you better your business, to help understand how the state does business, and to have that working partnership. So make sure that your status is up to date. It helps us, it helps you from all the different things. This is the website for certification. Like I said, I'm not going to go through each one of these things, but this is the list of the documents and things you have to be able to be Hub certified in the new EBP. I know John is super excited. Actually, the whole Hub office is probably pretty excited that your registration will now take place within EBP and will be much more digitized than it has been. So these are all the different documents that you would need to become Hub certified. This is just your list. It's going to be in this presentation for you to be to have it at your ready. We have any questions on Hub information, things like that?
There are no new questions in the chat as far as I can see. And I see no hands raised. So perhaps we can move on.
Continue on.
Just when I said that, I'm sorry, Mayor, that okay. Keith raised his hand. So Keith, if you want to unmute and ask.
Yes, I would. The question is about the percent of if the hub vendor is the prime, what percentage what percentage is required if they have a sub on a contract?
So there is no requirement for a percentage. There's no requirements for hub spend. Our hub spend within the state works different than like the federal set aside. So within the state, it's an aspirational goal that we do 10% of all of our business with hub vendors. And so with that goal, that's the goal for all of the state agencies and construction. And so within the state agencies for goods and services purchases, we document, we're able to pull that percentage using John's great group of being able to pull all of that data and be able to see what our percentage is of use for the whole quarter. So there is no requirement of tier use, but it does allow us, because if most of our hub numbers are pulled directly from payments from out of our accounting system. But by providing that attachment with the tier spend, we're able to manually add that tier spend in an effort to meet our goal. Because it does get into that second and third tier of subcontractors. And if there is additional hub spend, we can add that to our overall numbers to be able to help get to our goal.
Okay. Another question is construction. Some construction projects allow you to be like I'm a project manager, and they allow you to general contractors, but Build NC does not allow that. Could you explain why Build NC versus a community college will allow you to be a subcontractor and be a prime, but you can't be one with Build NC, and we have so much of a need for projects in that area?
I'm not sure, because that Build NC, I'm not sure if that's a state construction situation. They have those different rules. I don't know. John, can you help with that?
Yeah, the Rebuild NC program is through the Department of Public Safety in the North Carolina Office of Resilience and Recovery. Sometimes you'll see that as NCORE. And they have a pre-qualification process going on where, to be a prime on that, you have to go through that pre-qualification process. And that's primarily because most of those dollars that they're using are federal funds. So that's not necessarily a state decision on how that pre-qualification is needed. You don't always need pre-qualification on state projects, but there's federal funds involved. So that's why there's pre-qualification on that Rebuild NC program. I'm not totally sure that absolutely answers your question, because you might have been talking about subcontracting, but I just wanted to share that piece. Does that help at all?
Yeah, I guess it does, but like I said, I submit my pre-qualifications to them, but told that you had to be a general contractor, and I have general contractors working with me.
Uh-huh.
I got you.
Okay.
I had to go through that process and figure all that out with them. I appreciate your answer, though.
Sure.
Yeah.
I have a question from Michelle Nelson. Hand raised.
Yes, hi. Yes, hi. I was wondering if in this presentation you'll cover how to effectively present the bids, right? Like what's required, what's acceptable in terms of submission. And if you're not going to cover that, where can I find that information to make sure that bidding meets the qualifications?
Yeah, we'll get into the actual specifics of how to bid and what needs to be included in your bid and where to look for those things. Yep,
Got it.
I'll get into that. Yep. Mm-hmm.
And then our final question is from KV Bruce.
Yes,
Bruce
Bruce
Cavey.
Cavey. Yes, this is Bruce Cavey, Business Development Manager for Max Agility. We're an agile coach and talent shop. Do we have to go and sign up with CAI or anything as a hub to get bids for temporary staffing? Is that separately, or will that be talked to today?
Yeah, so CAI is the overall manager of that IT staffing contract. So that's that mandatory. Actually, I don't know if it's mandatory, but I think it is mandatory. Anyways, it is our DIT staffing, supplemental staffing contract. And so any department that needs that supplemental contract would buy off that CAI. And like I said, there's multiple hub vendors and multiple vendors on that list. That's probably your best way to be able to get that. There potentially could be some reason where we would directly solicit, but if that's that mandated resource, then that's where we go. But then we are able to capture that spend because DIT gives us the list of the departmental spend within that contract because there are so many hub vendors on that contract. So we are able to capture that spend, but yes, that's probably the best way is to go to CAI. If you look on DIT's website, which you'll see in the back of this presentation, and you look under their state term contracts for the CAI, there's a contract manager contact. I would contact them and say, how do I get on this contract? What's the best way to get on this contract? And they'll probably shoot you in the best direction. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So if you would lower your hands, if you got your questions answered, and then Meredith, we can move forward.
All righty. All right, we're going to talk about seeking competition. So this is where we're going to get into our different types of solicitation documents, what to look for in those documents. We're going to talk about the solicitation content of how it's laid out. And then we're going to talk about the difference between requirements and evaluation criteria and how those things are used and evaluated. So we talk about solicitation planning. It's up to the end user, the guy that turns the rents, that needs boiler help, to identify. I don't know that his boiler's broken. He knows. So he identifies the need at the division level. They define what they need, and they help start gathering information as far as developing the specifications, the scope of work, all of those types of needs. Once they gather all that information, they put in their requisition, and then it goes through the approval flow of budget to make sure there's money. It goes through their director to make sure that they're authorized to purchase. And then it goes through any executive team for them to approve. And then it comes to purchasing. And we start to review those specifications, prepare the solicitation document that will be posted or sent directly to the vendor, depending on how much money we're talking, and then really develop the procurement piece. So we talk about who you need to contact to market your supplies to. You really need to market to the end user level. Can you go through the purchasing office to find who the end users are? Yes. But when we talk about who actually knows that there's a need for something or to gather that information of those scopes and stuff like that, it is at the end user level. And once they develop those specifications and scope of work, and they come to us, we are the question people. So we want to make sure that that scope of work is solid. It's not so solid that it eliminates competition, because we're always trying to increase competition to make sure we're getting the best price and the best work and the best product. So we might ask them, when does the work need to happen? Because they don't remember to think about those kinds of things. But the logistics of how this project is going to happen is all up to the purchasing office to make sure it's part of the contract. So that will be something as easy as a vendor direct quote. So we start with these things that are under that small purchase threshold of $25,000 and under. Those are on your documents. Know that we will not sign your document. So if it is a small purchase under $25,000, we will use that as a quote. It will go through e-procurement and you will get a purchase order, but there's never any signatures on your quote. We don't get into signatures of signing an actual contract until we're over that small purchase threshold. So our buyers go out, our end users go out, they select from our registered vendors to reach out to the community to get those quotes. Know that any quotes that you submit need to be 30 days or current, 30 days current, and it has to be on some kind of letter branded letterhead. An email with this costs this much money doesn't work. We actually have to have a formal quote that has when the quote actually expires. They attach that quote from you in e-procurement. It goes through those approval processes, and then the PO is cut and issued to the email that the vendor is registered in EVP. As direct quotes. If there are specifics that need to be in your quote, make sure that you are specified, because when we get that dollar amount, that's what they are approved to spend. So if there is shipping attached, please make sure it's on the quote. If there is some kind of other cost that's not associated, maybe it's something you won't know until you get in there. Please be specific in your quote that is not going to be able to be determined. Maybe I have to dig down and get to this equipment, and I won't know what the problem is until I get to it. So just be aware that you can work with these guys when you can work with that end user to make sure that he understands what that quote means. Then we have the informal quote PDF. We use this for very simple goods. So it is literally a 4-page PDF. I want 5 widgets, and you tell me how much each widget is, and it calculates how many dollars it is. It does make you agree to the terms and conditions. So this is used for purchases up to $50,000, where we have to get the vendor to sign those terms and conditions. It doesn't allow for a lot of specifications. So if we're getting into a specified service, we will use the RFQ document instead of this document. But it does get you to sign to the terms and conditions of doing business with the state, so it can be used for goods or services up to 50 grand. The RFQ document is kind of a non-advertised procurement. So this is where we're going directly to the vendors. We need to buy something that's under 50 grand, or if there is some reason why that competition can be waived, we will use the request for quotes to get you under contract if it's under 50 grand, or it actually doesn't matter how much money it is. If it's over 25,000, we can use this RFQ for those waivers of competition. But if we're seeking competition, it can be used for things under $50,000 instead of that PDF. It gets the vendor to agree to those terms and conditions. It can be sent via fax. I don't know who uses fax anymore, but via fax and email, and it can be opened soon as we get it. So as soon as we get it back from you on email, we can open those. There is no bid opening. There is just, we open those emails and see what the contracts. Your RFQ document, the informal PDF, and the rest of these documents that I'm going to talk about, they become the contract when countersigned by the state. So we're going to get into what these different documents look like, but know that what you are submitting does eventually become your contract. The RFQs are sent directly to you over email, and then you respond via email. Invitation for bids are for formal bids, and they are for well-defined goods or simple services. So we know exactly what we need. We just need to know how much money you are. Most of the evaluation is based on lowest cost, meeting the requirements. So the requirements are you either have it or you don't. And if you don't, then we go with the next bid that does. So it's lowest bid meeting those specifications or requirements. For all formal bids, they have to be posted out on the IPS system, which then in July is going to turn over to be EVP, for a minimum of 10 days. That's not 10 calendar days. That's not 10 business days. The code just says 10 days. But there will be steps within the invitation for bids, including a question and answer period. And so when we have that deadline for questions, a deadline for us to post the answers, all of that, sometimes that 10 days can be pushed out further than that, but it has to be posted per the code for a minimum of 10 days. With ISBs, we have public bid openings, and there's potential for site visits. Maybe you need to put your eyeballs on what you're bidding. Maybe you need to take your own measurements. So with that, when you see these documents, just know that you're going to site visits, and that you know when the public bid opening is. You do not have to attend the public bid opening, but that's when your bid has to be in. So any late bids will not be opened or received. The next type of document we use is a request for proposals, an RFP. This is used for more detailed of special complex services or a combination of goods and services that are over that 50 grand total dollar value. We can award on something other than just cost. It will be spelled out in that document what we are going to award on, and it can't change once we have the bids open. So when you go through that document, you'll be able to see, we're going to look at your staffing. We're going to look at what your technical requirements are. We're going to look at all these different things. And this is how we are going to rate those. And this is how we are going to award them. They also, RFPs must be posted for a minimum of 10 days, and they have the same public bid openings and potential for site visits. The other type of document that we don't use very often, but we do have at our disposal, is the request for information. The only time I've ever used this is for an IT purchase where we're buying a new system and we're just not really sure what's out there, and we kind of want to help us build our technical requirements to see what we need. So the purpose of it is simply to gather information and to ascertain a level of interest from potential vendors. There is never an award. It requires the vendor to submit a lot of information, so we don't get a great response usually. But there's no terms and conditions, and it's posted out there for vendors to give us that information, and then it's canceled once it's done. It doesn't become public record until an RFP or an IFB is actually posted that's awarded. If we used what we got back in the RFI, that would all become part of the procurement file. But until that happens and that's awarded, this all just stays confidential, and we are just using it to help us write our scope for some potential projects. All of these documents with P&C, the majority of what I buy is P&C products. So they are outlined in this template. And these are templates, so some of these things can change around where they are, but in general, this is kind of the outline as all of these different solicitation documents that are posted out there in on IPS. So the first section is, why do we need to buy this? Is there some new law, some new rule? Is this just something that we standardly do our practice? Why do we need to purchase this? Who are the people? Who are the players? Who are the stakeholders? Where is the work being performed? Things like that. The purpose and the background of why we're buying this, which includes the contract term. So if it's a one-time spot buy, it could just have a term of you have 30 days to supply whatever this is. If it is a janitorial contract and it's going to have a 1-year term with 2 optional renewals, that will be spelled out in the contract term. So whatever the length of time the contract is good for will be posted under Section 1. Section 2 is the information on how to bid. So this includes the solicitation schedule, so when it's posted, when those site visits are, when the questions are due, where to submit your questions, what needs to be included with your bid, where do I submit my bid, any definitions, because you know here at the state we talk in letters that don't make sense, and lots of acronyms. So all those acronyms will be spelled out. So everything under 2 is how to bid and the information on how to bid. Section 3 is how we plan to award. So if it's an IFB and it's the lowest cost meeting specs, that's what it'll say. It'll say, hey, submit your bid and we are going to award this with the lowest bid that meets all of the requirements. It could say, here's the evaluation criteria, and here's what we expect to see in that evaluation criteria, and here's how we're going to use this criteria. Here are the point scale that we're going to put in this criteria. All of that would be under Section 3. Section 4 are the requirements of the contract. So pricing, delivery, invoicing, warranties, references. If we are asking for experience, what kind of experience are we asking for? Any kind of proposal requirements to come back with your bid. So if we ask for samples, where do you send those? That kind of information. Financial stability could be in there. If we're asking for a general contractor's license, it could be in there. Background checks. Maybe you have to do those background checks after award, but before you start the work, those types of things. The biggie and the meat is the scope of work. So if awarded, this is what you are going to be responsible to do. So it'll have the tasks and your specifications of products and your scope of work and any objection of safety labels to make sure that it meets, that plugs in and doesn't catch the building on fire. If we're asking for a technical approach of how you're going to complete those tasks, that could be in the scope of work. Who's doing the work? The specifications of who's supposed to do the work could be in project organization. Section 6 is then after you're awarded, because this becomes your contract, it's going to be the administration of the contract. Who's doing the work and what is their information so that it's readily available within the contract. Any reports that are going to be due. If you have a problem with this contract, how is that dispute resolution? Any changes to the contract, any product recalls, all of that information is under the Section 6 contract administration. And then the attachments could be the pricing form. Maybe it's a huge pricing form where you're giving an item number. It could be, I want to know how much this product is. It could be, I want to know how much it's going to cost me for a year. Whatever that pricing form is usually an attachment. The instructions to vendors are standard. The North Carolina terms and conditions are standard. Those are now links out there on the website, on PNC's website or DIT's website. Location of workers. Is it happening within the U.S.? Is it happening outside the U.S.? EO50, which is a price matching opportunity for goods that we will get into in a little bit. A financial condition. Is your company in good financial standing? Do you have any judgments against you? When was your last audit? Things like that are on that attachment. That attachment for supplemental information, the hub attachment. That's now standard in all of our solicitations. Any maps, diagrams, additional information that we need to attach could always be an appendix or attachment. So like I said, these are templates. These things can definitely move around to meet the needs of whoever is drafting the document. But on the norm, this is where you find most of those things. Some other documents that we have, because there's never anything constant in procurement except for change. So things change. When we go to post something, if something changes while it's still open for bid, we post addendums. Those are also posted out on IPS, will be in EBP when the change happens. But if it's happening and we need to change the solicitation document that's out there, we post an addendum. The addendum is also used to answer all the questions that were submitted by vendors for everyone to see the answers. So we post that on an addendum. Request for clarification happens during the evaluation stage. So all the bids have come in and we've gotten a question that we can't figure out something in your proposal, in your bid. So we might ask you for clarification on that. A BAFO document is a request for a best and final offer. We have, per the code, the right to negotiate. So if we get in and we need to get into negotiations, those negotiations are confirmed on a BAFO document, which is called a best and final offer. Changing something, if we're ever changing something that was in your original bid, because your bid becomes the contract, if we need to change something in that, a BAFO document will be sent to solidify those negotiations and those changes to the final contract. An amendment happens after the contract's been awarded. So now you have this contract and something needs to change in the contract, that's on an amendment document. We'll get into the weeds of what these are in a bit. When you look at those documents that are out there on IPS or an RFQ document that's sent for you for something to sign the terms and conditions, or that little PDF, any of these documents that are going to become a contract, you need to look out for the words that say shall, must, and mandatory. Those things are hard things that are requirements. And if you don't meet those requirements, vendor shall, vendor must, mandatory site visits, those types of things, your bid will automatically be rejected. One of those things that we see that is the dumbest thing that you hate for somebody who's gone through all that work is that if your bid is not signed, this is a legally binding contract, and if it's not signed, it's automatically rejected. So please be very careful that on the execution page, there is a signature block that looks just like this, and that the vendor is signing that block. It is legally binding your company to provide the services or the products within at the prices quoted within to make sure who is actually authorized to sign it. But when you see these documents, I'm not going to lie, they're several pages long. Just make sure you go through it with a fine-tooth comb, and that when you're ready to submit, that you didn't forget to actually sign your proposal, your bid, or whatnot. We talked about the solicitation schedule. So this is under section 2 of most of the solicitations. It's going to give you the schedule. Then it's going to talk about there's an issue date. That's the date it hit the street, or that's the date it was sent to you via email. The date the bids are submitted down here is the date that we have the opening, or that they're due back. If it's an RFQ that you're sending via email, it's due back by that date. That is the deadline to get it in. So between the issue date and the submit bid date, that's those 10 days minimum. If it's a formal bid that's out on the street. So an IFB or an RFP over 50 grand, it will be from issue date to submit bid date, at least 10 days. In between here, we could have a site visit. We will always have a question and answer period. So we're going to get into where to submit your questions and how to submit your questions, but those dates are important. So if there's a mandatory site visit, that date will be here. It could be an urged and cautioned site visit as well, and we'll get into what that is. But these dates are very important. This submit bid date is the most important. If it's not there by that time, it will not be opened. It will not let you upload your submission. The 2 dates on the back could be TBD. We might not know when we plan to contract award, and we might not know when the effective date is. However, if we have a contract for, let's say, janitorial services that's going to end at the end of July, on July 31st, we would know that the contract effective date then would be August 1. So we might put in there August 1 for the new contract to start. Question and answer period. So this is the most important. If you take nothing else away from today, use your question and answer period. You can ask anything. You can ask, what are you currently paying? You can ask, who's the current vendor? You can ask any questions you have about the evaluation. You could ask anything that you have questions about, the task, the scope, who you're working with, what are you looking for? Those types of questions have to provide an answer. So if you have anything you don't understand or you just need general knowledge of, submit it during the question and answer period. You're going to hear me talk about the Ariba sourcing tool, which is a new piece of e-procurement in which vendors submit their bids through the e-procurement sourcing tool. Within the sourcing tool, there's a message board. That's where you submit these questions. But within the solicitation document, it will tell you where to submit your questions, how to submit your questions. It'll tell you what format we want your questions in. So be mindful, that's all under section 2 of I need to know how to bid. Part of it is going to be the bid questions. Once we get all those questions, we provide all the answers for it. We take out who submitted the question, because that's nobody's business who submitted the questions. And then we post an addendum with the answers to all the questions we've gotten. So that addendum then is part of the contract as well. When you're out on site visits, you can ask questions. If you have any questions that's like, I don't understand, you can always call whoever the procurement professional is and ask those questions over phone. But just know that any answers given over the phone or given during a site visit verbally are non-binding. Anything that's put in writing becomes part of the contract and therefore is binding. Be mindful that if there is an addendum posted with questions, any addendum, so addendums are changes during the bid process, there could be that you have to return that addendum, that you have to physically sign, I read this and I understand it, and now it's part of the contract. And if that is not returned, it potentially could find you non-responsive. So just be on the lookout for that. That's one of those shall, must, or mandatory return type of things. Site visits. We have 2 different types of site visits we're able to do. Normally, we only do site visits if you physically need to put your eyeballs on something. We do sometimes have pre-proposal conferences for large scale things where vendors can call in and get some information or come to a meeting or seminar or whatnot. But on the norm, that's handled by the question and answer period. So site visits are usually held for things that vendors actually have to see. We have mandatory site visits, which are mandatory that you attend to be able to accept your bid. And then we have urged and caution, which will allow you to, they're at a certain time, location, that we will be available, but you don't have to come to be able to bid. Mandatory are usually used for things that you need access. So you need one of us to give access to the building to be able to see what you're bidding on. Urged and caution could be you're doing work in a parking lot and we don't have to be there for you to be able to go around and count the spaces of the parking lot. So, or where we feel like our scope is detailed enough to where you could just ask questions. We don't need to actually mandate that you come see it. Mandatory site visits, the big thing, they're at a specific time, location. You cannot be late. They make you sign in when you get there. And then if your name is not on that signature sheet, they take that sheet up as soon as the site visit starts. They take that sheet up and you can't sign it. If your name is not your company name, a representative from your company, when you submit your bid, we match it to that site visit sheet. And if your company was not on the mandatory site visit, you would be found non-responsive for not attending the mandatory site visit. So any offers that come late, you're welcome to walk around with us, but we will not accept your bid. Urged and caution, you can come. It's not nice to be late, but we can have late people come. The attendance is not required to be able to accept your bid, but it's usually at a specific time, location, or whatnot. We still have you sign in. That's just so we know who's there, but it's not a requirement to attend to be able to bid. So we're talking about submitting your bids. We have really 4 different ways to submit bids. State. Of course, the first one is that direct submittal. So that's via email. Those are those RFQs, those IQRs, or just your standard vendor quote is all submitted via email on the norm now. I mean, I guess you could hand walk them in, but a lot of us are working remote. But direct submittal is by email, by mail. Again, a lot of that's kind of gone away, but it used to be the norm that we would get a lot of bids via mail. Now, that's the one good thing that came out of COVID is that we finally moved into the 21st century and can receive electronic bids. We have 2 different tools, and it's depending on the agency on which tool you will use, but it will be listed within the solicitation document how to submit your bids. One way is via NC Bids, which is just strictly an upload. You go out in IPS and you click the NC bids button and you upload your PDF document with your entire proposal. You can upload multiple documents. I think there is a stipulation on how the size of each document, but not on how many documents you can upload with NC bids. North Carolina e-procurement sourcing tool. So the Ariba sourcing tool is what most of us have moved towards. This sourcing tool is a module within e-procurement that allows for us to receive bids and allows us to break out pieces of the bids. So it allows, if we had a pricing form that was an Excel document that had multiple different things, instead of getting one PDF, we upload the Excel document that automatically calculates the totals, things like that. And it also helps us make sure that nobody is found non-responsive for not returning stuff, because we have the ability to say, if we're asking you for a contractor's license, it will say, enter your contractor's, upload your contractor license here. And then it kind of, I mean, there's nothing to say that you wouldn't upload a document that says happy birthday, but it does kind of get you to say, okay, I need to upload my construction license here, and that way it's there and it's not non-responsive for not returning something like that. We're going to get a little more into the tool and how that works here in a second. We talk about requirements. So I know there was a question earlier between what needs to be submitted with your bid and then what is used to award your bid. Just know that requirements are those yes, no things. You either have it or you don't. It could be a requirement could be anything that you must deliver the product within 15 days. If you can't deliver that product for 30 days, and potentially we could go with a vendor that is a little more money to then can get it to me faster because I need it faster. Those types of things. So when you see through the bid document in the scope and under section 4 in those requirements of the actual proposal, in the solicitation document, those yes, no things are there, either there, you can either meet it or you don't. So another example of that is that contractor's license. Be mindful to look for, I need to submit with my proposed copy of the general contractor's license. So it has to be with my proposal that I have to submit that general contractor's license. If we ask for 3 references where you've performed similar work, are those references there? Did you provide me 3 of them? Now, when we get into evaluation, we might look of, is it similar work? But the requirement piece is, are those references in the bid? We ask for 3, are there 3? The vendor, this last example, the vendor must provide product service manual. If I saw that in a requirement, my first thing is I'm going to ask during the question and answer period, do you need that service manual with my bid? Or if I'm awarded, I have to provide that service manual with the product. So that's a good way when you're looking through requirements and the specifications and all of that. If you have those types of questions, ask them during the question and answer period. You don't want to get into a situation where, like, I didn't provide my service manual, and then you're going to have to fight it and say, well, you didn't say I had to provide it with my proposal. But that's just one example. If you have any questions like that, they have to answer them, and then it would be in the addendum. So if they did clarify in the addendum, yes, you must provide with your proposal, that addendum is now part of the solicitation document. So if it's not there with your proposal, it's automatically rejected. So make sure you look at the addendums for all the bids that are out there and make sure you answer those questions. We talk about criteria. Criteria is how the planner plans to meet the project and how we're going to award. So we could ask, usually these are the 3 biggies, but there could be a multiple things that we look for to award, and it can definitely be very detailed as to what we're looking for to be able to score high, to be able to move your proposal to the top. So we're talking about past vendor experience. We're asking for vendor experience. This is kind of general language. In its proposal, the vendor must demonstrate experience with public and private sector clients with similar or greater size and complexity of North Carolina. That's very general. But if you're able to say, I'm going to go power wash, this particular bid is to power wash the parking decks in the state of North Carolina downtown complex. Those parking decks are huge. We got 5 of them. They're multiple levels. That's a lot of concrete to cover. And you're like, well, I've never done business with North Carolina, but maybe I power wash the parking decks out at the airport. That's a big, or at the mall or whatever. So when we're asking for that experience, how we are going to evaluate is how you use what you've done and relate it to what we're asking you to do. The more information, the better. So if you are submitting your proposal, make sure that you look at the scope of work and try to relate it to what you've done in the past. And the better you do that, the better outcome you're going to get. If you have any questions on what are the square footage that you're looking for in this area, what do you deem would be the best? Ask that question. They have to give you an answer. That's your time to figure out what they're really looking for. Same thing with staffing plans. So the staffing plan is who's doing the work. We might ask for resumes. You are trying to get these people. Let's say that you're the prime and you're going to build this team to do this project. We want to know that what that team member has done is related to what we're doing and how you're going to staff this work and what the qualifications are for each person that's doing these tasks. The more information, the better you can relate it to what we're asking you, the better your group is going to get, your proposal is going to go to the top. If you have any questions on it, ask it during that question and answer period. The technical approach. So this is the outline of all the tasks, and we're asking you how you're going to accomplish that. There might be very detailed information in this criteria. We want to know what your timeline is. We want to know what systems you're using. We want to know all these different things. If those things are not clear in what is in the solicitation document, ask, does this meet this? Will this work? Are you looking for something like this? You know, what are those specifics to make sure that your proposal answers those questions the best way that you know how. That's my best advice to be able to get to that. Any questions on evaluation and solicitation documents?
Okay, so we have a question. It says bids have been submitted. We didn't get the bid. We reach out to department to get official numbers, but department won't respond back. How do we get that information?
We're going to go over public records request. And so every department has a communications office, and that's one of their duties is to pull the public records for procurement. And so when we get to that, we'll kind of show you how to find those communication departments and what to ask for there, because they do have to provide those public records. But as far as tabulations, the tabulations, when you go out on IPS, if it was a formal bid, it will be, the tabulation will stay out there. Now, when I say that, it only stays out there for 30 days after award. So if it's been less than 30 days after they have awarded it, you should be able to search by bid number and be able to find that, as long as you have the bid number, be able to find that particular procurement, and the tabulation will be posted with the amounts that everybody bid.
And Meredith, with the new EVP system that's coming out, I believe I've heard them say it's going to stay there.
Yeah.
That it's not going to disappear. So
That's correct.
again, having that that bid number will help you to know and find that later on.
Mm-hmm.
From the chat, a question: does the state require vendors to have insurance? If so, what coverage?
In every solicitation that goes out, there is, under section 4, it'll say, what are the insurance requirements? Is this considered a small purchase, a medium purchase, which is under $1 million or over $1 million? And then within the state's terms and conditions, there's different tiers of what is required for those different tiers of the contract. If you ever want to take an exception to that, you could submit it during the question answer period, my insurance is XY. Would you be willing to accept a change to the terms and conditions, an exception to the terms and conditions? Just know that anytime that you submit an exception to our terms and conditions, we don't have to accept it. It very well could kick you out. So just be noticeable of that. You know, you could put, would you accept this? And even if you don't, please don't make me non-responsive. I'll be willing to negotiate this or something to that effect when you submit those questions.
All right, and then question in the chat, and we may need clarity on this. It says, will I have access to the bid documents? Who should I contact with questions after the meeting? And so I'm not quite sure what the reference is there. Teresa placed this question in the chat. So Teresa, if you want to unmute and give us some clarity on your question.
I think bid documents, I don't know if that's a public records question, or if you're looking for the solicitation document at the time, they are posted on IPS if it's going out on the street. So if it's after the fact and the bid is closed and you want to see the bid documents that came in for a particular bid, that's a public records, and we'll get into that. And then if you have questions on this presentation after the meeting, Carla will give her information. And, or you can still put it in the chat here, and we'll still get that, and then Carla will respond or ask me if it's a question that I need to answer.
Correct. And then we have one hand raised, and that is Keith. If you want to unmute and ask.
In my delivery, I think you said something about you can deliver it to the particular place. I didn't, you know, like the direct delivery, like let's say,
Direct.
Can I do direct, like go to the place and hand it in an envelope, sealed and all that with everything on it?
If you can, it would be listed in the solicitation document. So each solicitation under Section 2 will tell you how bids will be accepted.
Okay.
So for like, if it's coming from DOA, we only accept bids now through the sourcing tool. However, there could be, like, I think DOT is not within the tool. They may use NC bids. So their solicitation documents would say you must submit your bid through bids. Then there could potentially, I don't think anybody's doing anything through mail anymore, but there could, I don't know.
Yeah,
however, they are accepting bids will be listed within that particular solicitation document under that Section 2.
Yeah, there's one I just recently read where it said mail, and they give you the mail, how to mail it,
Okay.
post office or whatever. And mail may not get it there. That's why I was questioning. Unless I do it overnight.
If you have any questions, either submit that during the question and answer period, or there should be a person's contact information for that particular procurement professional. Call them and say, hey, are you in the office? Can I drop it off? Just know that, you know, since 2020, a lot of us are working remote, so that might not be something that you can, but you need to answer that question well in advance of that due date, so that you can make sure and get it there. Yep.
One more question. The hub. Do I attach my letter as an attachment? The letter
it's the attachment. It's an attachment in the back of the solicitation document, or if you're submitting in the Reba tool, it's an attachment you download, fill out, and upload. So it's within the solicitation document as well. Mm-hmm.
The other thing, I said one more thing, but when you talk about sourcing to and NCB bids, will we be trained on that as new hub members on those?
Yeah, so I'm going to get into, I think here in a little bit, the like specifics of that. And then there's also the training on the EVP, on eProcurement's website.
Awesome. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Meredith.
Yeah.
Super quick. We do occasionally get questions about people asking about the vendor number on that hub form. It is not asking about a hub vendor number. It's asking about your EVP number. So when you go into EVP, you're assigned a number in EVP. So it's not asking about a hub certification number, but about your electronic vendor portal number.
I'm going to move forward because I know we're in an effort of time, but I'm the thought column for a minute. All right, so we're going to get into responding to one of these solicitations or a request for a quote. So direct submittal, like I said, can be sent directly to whoever asked you for it for those RFQ responses, the IRQ responses, that little PDF, that 4-page PDF. If we send it to you directly, you can just respond to that email with your RFQ response or your IQR or your quote. If it's for those small purchases, just know that your quote needs to be less than 30 days old to be accepted. There is a tool within e-procurement. I'm not sure how many state agencies are using it, but it replaced our old e-quote system. So there is a tool within e-procurement where we can reach out within e-procurement to those EVP registered vendors and ask for quotes within the collaborative requisitioning space. Those can be used up to 50 grand because it does make you sign those terms and conditions. We'll go through that a little bit more in a second. IPS right now is where we post those bids. Just know that submitting the bids for formal bids that are posted to IPS could be by mail, by NC bids, or by the e-procurement sourcing tool. Whichever way will be spelled out in the solicitation documents. Agencies use the EVP vendor portal to find our vendors. So you must be registered within that EVP vendor portal to be able to submit a bid via NC bids or the Ariba sourcing tool. So that collaborative space, formal quoting provides pricing function within the e-procurement system. And an end user is setting up their requisition. They can select the vendors using EVP to send the requisition directly to the vendor to fill out and submit back. Currently, our department is not using the collaborative space, so I'm not 100% sure, but I know there is training on it on the e-procurement website. And I'm not sure how many departments are using it, but I know DOA is not, so I'm not very familiar with the steps of it. But like I said, there is that training to use the collaborative space on e-procurement's website, and that's the link to it. And it can be used up to 50 grand because we're getting the vendor to sign the terms and conditions using a collaborative space. The interactive purchasing system is the IPS system. So you've heard me say IPS or interactive purchasing system. This is what is getting ready to go and be replaced by the new EVP. But right now, that is where all of our bids are posted that are formal solicitations. So those IFBs, those RFPs are out there. It is for all state agencies. So it's not just our state agencies, it's universities, community colleges, municipalities, there's charter schools, all of them post out on IPS. It allows us to advertise for those goods and services and seek that open and fair competition. It also allows us to tabulate the bidders' responses. So we can post our tabulations after bid award. And once the bids are opened, we can then update that tabulation. So we open the bids, and then once we award, we then document what the pricing is. Everything stays confidential until after award. And then once it's awarded, you can see all the bidders' prices, and then the actual award is posted out there too. It allows for you as a vendor to be able to market your goods and services because you can get a link. You get a notice when things are posted under the commodity IPS that you are registered for. So it adds for that an automatic opportunity notification. You can also, it's a 24-hour, it's a website. So you can go out there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week and go find those opportunities. There's multiple ways to look in IPS, and there will be an EVP as well when we transfer to that. You can look by department. You can look by commodity code. You can look by keyword searches. There's all these different ways to be able to look for opportunities out there that are formal bids out on IPS. It's a free registration. When you are registered in EVP, there are 2 buttons to click. One is, yes, I am okay to receive purchase orders from e-procurement. And the other one is, I want to receive notices from IPS that are posted out there for my opportunities. Make sure you got both of those buttons. Click yes, so that you will get those notifications. It allows for you, when you have entered a bid, or even if you hadn't and you just want to know what people have bid, that tabulation stays out there. And like John, now, once we award, it stays out there for 30 days and then it goes away. In the new EVP system, once we post that tabulation and award information, it's there forever. I don't know forever, but it's there forever, is what they're telling us. So those tabulations are out there for you to see in IPS. This is what IPS looks like. So if we did search, you can do here, search by category, bids by department, search open bids. So open bids, and the bids will be listed under each department, are the ones that are currently open and receiving bids. Once a bid closes and you want to see the tabulation and the award, you have to know the bid number. Click search by bid number, put that in, and it will show you the tabulation and award. So be very mindful that if you are submitting a bid, or if you want to, if you're following a purchase out there, that you make note of what that bid number is, because the only way for you to be able to see your tabulation and your award is search by bid number. I believe in the new EVP, they said that you'll be able to search it not just by the bid number in the new system, but currently out on IPS, you can only search by that. This is also has a link to the electronic vendor portal where you register and can search for vendors, and a click to the link of PNC's website to find those state term contracts. So all of this is on IPS. IPS is going to be one of those links that I have in the back of the presentation that you'll be able to go into IPS. You don't have to have a password. It's an open website. Anybody can look at it. Know that anything that is posted in red means that it's an agency-specific term contract. There's no minimum, no maximum, state term contracts. So those are those contracts that are up for bid and that DIT or PNC have posted would be in red for state term contracts. Agency-specific contracts that don't have the function like state term contracts for a particular agency will be in green. This is the Department of Natural and Cultural Resources. At this time, when I took the screenshot, these were the bids that they had out. If you click on the number, it is going to give you the solicitation document. If you click on the bid button, if it says e-bid, that is for NC bids. So that's going to take you and just submit that PDF of your bid. If it says NCEP, that is a sourcing tool bid. That will take you to the discovery and into the sourcing tool to submit your bid. Any addendums that will be posted will also be posted in addition to just the solicitation. If the number, it will take you to the addendum that's out there. Of course, you won't have that. Tip and trick, if you click the help button right here where it says 46, that is going to take you to the purchasing director for that particular department, university, community college, or whatnot. It's got all their information, their email, their phone number, everything. So if you click help, when you're searching by department, when you pull up department, it's going to pull up every department in the state. If you click on that vendor, that department that has bids posted and you click help, it's going to give you that individual. If you want to ask a question for this particular procurement within the solicitation document, it will give you the purchaser that is in charge of that procurement. So this is going to give you the director of the department, and then this will give you the actual purchaser that is in knowledge of that particular bid. So NC bids, like I said, it's a feature of IPS. So it's just an upload portal. You just simply uploading a PDF. You do have to have your EVP number. You do have to log in with your EVP registration to be able to upload your response. You need your username, your password to be able to respond for EBP. So you would click that eBid button, it'll ask you for your registration, and then you upload that PDF of your proposal. The sourcing tool, there is plenty of training on how to use the sourcing tool. And the worst part is that what you see as a vendor on the sourcing tool and what we see as a manager in the sourcing tool are different. So if you have any problems at all with the sourcing tool, call the help desk. They can help you upload your response. They can answer any of the questions concerning the sourcing tool. The link to training, there are webinars and training on how to respond to a sourcing event. All of that is in this link. It is also a feature right now in IPS. It will be in EBP and when we change over in a couple weeks. The vendor also has to be registered with EBP, but when you get in the tool, it will make you set up an Ariba network registration as well to be able to respond within the sourcing tool. EBP username and password will be there, and the button in IPS will say NCEP, not eBid, and that is then a sourcing bid. The vendor responds within the system to each section of the required content. So like I said, we're able within the tool to be able to section out the different requirements or the different sections that we need a response from the vendor. So when you click that NCEP button, it takes you to the discovery page, which kind of gives you an outline of this is what we're bidding for. It kind of gives you just it gives you the times and dates when things are due. It might have a little summary. It does have a question and answer period or a question and answer little message chat box here. You can submit questions here, but we request that you actually get into the posting and use the message receiving in the tool to submit your questions. That allows you to add an attachment with all your questions. Maybe you have so many questions that you need to put them on a Word document or a PDF. You can actually upload that within the messaging tool. So once you click NCEP, it's going to bring you to a page that looks like this. Then you click respond to posting, which will actually take you into the event. Once you're in the event, you can see any prerequisites. You can see the actual content. There's checklists to make sure that you get everything done. And there's a ticking down time lock until they're due. Do not wait until the bid opening time to submit your bid. It does take you a minute to get through here and upload everything. And if you wait till that minute, the minute that this clock stops, it cuts you out of the system. You cannot upload anything else. So know that you can always upload your response early. Just be on the lookout for any addendums that would come that could change things. In the meantime, if you already upload your response, there is a way to then replace your response that you uploaded with something new. Any questions on how to submit bids?
As the chat, there's a question of if searching by bid number for awarded bids, how old or how far back can we search?
Pretty far back. Oh, no. So only 30 days in IPS. So in IPS, after 30 days, the award and the tabulation goes away. In the new system, you'll be able to search back starting from when it starts until forever. So, but that is one problem with IPS that they're fixing with the new system is that you'll be able to search past that 30 days. But right now, when we post the tabulation and the award and it kind of closes in IPS, it only stays out there for 30 days and then it drops off. You can always get that information by either calling the purchasing department or submitting a public records request, which we'll get into in a minute.
And then Brandon Buffalo has his hand raised. Brandon, if you want to quickly unmute and ask.
Yes, I just was gonna let y'all know I was in a meeting, so I was late getting on this call. I really wanted all the information I could get on bidding on stuff for the state or DOT. what have you. So I know I missed a fair amount of information. Are you all going to have a link that like I could maybe go back and refresh and just kind of get more of a general idea of what I did miss earlier?
Yeah, so yeah, we're recording the session and then Carla will send out the presentation at the end.
Okay.
And we also did post the link to the December 2022 session that was recorded, and it's already out on YouTube.
Okay, great. Another question. I am a a hub vendor, obviously. I haven't done any bids yet at all for the state. I haven't seen anything quite yet that fell on what I want to bid on, but it does seem to be kind of it seems a little bit complicated, I guess, just from what I've seen. But and I'm hoping that this today, what you all have done, I'll be able to go back and look at it and get more of an idea how to use this system that you all have. Because yeah, all of these different systems y'all keep speaking of, it just kind of it kind of loses me. But anyways, I'm hoping that this really helps me.
All right.
Okay, and we have a question from Bruce Cavey. Bruce, if you want to unmute.
Yep. Yes. If we're playing with both systems now for RFPs, first question is the hub team putting out temporary staffing that is not DIT owned, and do we get bids on those or requests for bids on that? I'm getting all the bids for large DIT contracts and stuff. And so that's one question. And two is, if we are playing with a system as it currently is, do we have to do anything to re-register or anything come July 10th when the EVP
No. No, so it will automatically transfer you over to the new system if you're already registered to do business with the state. So if you're already in EVP as it is now, it will automatically transfer you into the new EVP. Yep. And when you say play around with the system, if you go out on IPS, and so that's where anybody that would need anything that is formal bid, all of those things could be there. And we could have short-term staffing for scanning services, something like that that's not really IT based, would be an individual bid if it's going to be over 50 grand, right? So that's where those formal bids are out there.
But how are they generated? I mean, I got it from a DIT because I'm an IT guy. Mm-hmm. But how do I recognize those bids, or do I have to?
You can search through by keywords. You can search through by the commodity code, all on the IPS out there for those types of things, or you can search by the department because the department will have those bids listed as well. So,
and it's not under a specific temporary staffing contract for the state or anything like that?
No, we don't have one for, we don't have a state term contract for temporary staffing except for the IT side.
IT.
There's not a goods and there's not a goods and services state term contract for that. I think Brian Ham has had his hand up for a minute.
Yeah, I think it was left from earlier.
Yes, ma'am. Good morning. I am. My question is: we had a department reach out to us and requested a good. It was some hats. We do embroidery, screen printing, promotional and marketing items. Mm-hmm. They sent us a picture of the cap, and we requested the particular brand so that we can compare apples to apples, oranges to oranges. Obviously, by them taking the picture, they had that piece in their possession. However, they never responded back via email how they reached out to us before they submitted that bid to the masses on that particular item number and said that that's you guys' responsibility to do. At that point, if we're asking that question and we don't get that information, and we sufficiently how can we sufficiently ask the question or respond to the goods requested in order that we properly submit information that they're requesting to submit a bid?
Okay, so let me make sure I understand. So they asked you for a quote, and you provided them information that helped them draft scope that then they pushed out to the vendor community to get quotes for? And you want to know? So, like I said, if there's ever questions during that question and answer period, you could reach out to the department, or I would reach out directly back to the department and say, you know, any questions that you had on the scope, or I don't think am I answering that right?
No, ma'am. What happened? This was before they even put it to the procurement board. They reached out directly to us by email, and they gave us a spec on the hat. And when we replied or requested what type or what brand hat that is, they never responded back. And that went on for a couple of months. And then when we get an email, we get that same email out from the procurement department about this is what we're looking for to put out to the masses. But they came to us first before they did that, but they never replied or never responded to give us that answer on the kind of hat that it was.
Yeah.
Or that it is.
And I'll tell you, the end user is the one that's gathering the information to help us write the scope. So I can't talk to that they didn't respond back, but that's when they're identifying that need, they can go out to the vendor community and get those specifications. If you reply, they should have replied back, is what I'm going to say. But if they didn't, then they might have gotten that answer from somebody else, and they generated them their entire scope to send to procurement to then put it out. So I don't know how to answer that they didn't respond to you, but then the bid would have gone out to the street. And anytime that a bid is out on the street, you have the right to ask the question. But I would go back to the department and say, we couldn't bid on this properly because we didn't know this and you didn't respond back to us. I mean, that's the only way I know how to answer that one.
Meredith, I've got, I think, two things that I wanted to just put out there. And I don't know if these are actually what was going on with this particular situation. There are times when people need to do research on what's the going rate out there in the community. So they may do like a request for information kind of thing. And I'm not sure if that's what the situation was, but in those situations, it's not you're bidding on it. It's just them trying to get a sense of where do the prices fall, and what's a reasonable expectation. That might not be the situation in this one. There was another thought I had, and now it's left my head, so I apologize for that. Yeah, they definitely should be responding to you. The other thing was, most times, and Meredith may have covered this already, when there are specs put out, you usually don't have to go with a particular brand unless there is a particular reason for that. So a lot of times it will say, looking for, X kind of piping, and they'll probably describe it rather than say a particular brand. And there may be some term, and Meredith, you can probably pull it out of your head easier than I can, of like, it's got to be similar in quality.
Yeah, so there's the meets or exceeds the specifications below. So we try not to limit that competition to where it has to be a Nike hat. We might just say it needs to meet or exceed the specifications below, but we would put all of that in the document to know then what they're doing. And they might ask for samples to then review the samples and make sure it meets or exceeds those types of things. I'm going to move forward. I know we have some more questions, but I know we're limited on time too. So I'm going to go ahead and push forward with our rest of our presentation, and then I can go back through the chat window and we will stop at the end, and anybody that wants to stay on and ask questions can. Is that good, Carla?
That sounds good.
All right. Okay. So now we're going to be into the evaluation process. We're going to talk about bid openings and what happens at those, the evaluation methods that we use, the different things, because, you know, we said we can look at cost and then we can look at other things and all those different evaluation criteria, but the actual approval and award methods. We're going to look at reference checks and that executive order 50 price matching opportunity. And then we're going to get into the weeds of those clarifications and the BAFOs that take place in the evaluation process. So the bid proposal opening is part of the formal bid process. It does take time. When you see those solicitations out there, those formal bids, and it says bids are due June 15th at 2 o'clock, that's when we hold the bid opening. That is your deadline when the system cuts you off from being able to submit your bid. If you are mailing it in, and if it's not there by that 2 o'clock, they will mark it late and never open it. If you are hand walking it in, they'll have a time thing that they put it under and will stamp it with the time. And after that bid opening time has expired, no more bids will be received. But that is the time that the actual bid opening takes place. A lot of agencies now are doing bid openings over Teams. So I know we are doing that because we are all remote, but you can call in to Teams or attend the Teams meeting. It will be listed in the solicitation document where the Teams link is or the call-in number for it. All of that will be in the solicitation document. When we have the bid opening, if it's over Teams or in person, we do take attendance of who has attended. And we kind of explain once we open the bids, what are the next steps? So we might say, we know that this has got to go to PNC for final review. So we've opened all the bids. We're going to send them to the division to review and evaluate. From there, it's going to go to DIT security review. And from there, it's going to go to DIT final procurement reviews and approvals. And it's got to go through legal reviews or whatever it has to go through. Those next steps we'll kind of explain during that live bid opening. The vendors can only contact the purchasing agent during the evaluation period. So like I said, when you look on IPS, the number there on the right gives you the director. The number that's in the actual solicitation number in the solicitation document is the purchasing agent's name, number, and location, email address. All of that is within the solicitation document. If you have any questions, like where are we in the process? Who won this award? Where are we at? Call that purchasing agent. Know that even during the bid process, if you have any questions, we are the keeper of the information. We want to make sure that all bidders have all the information. So we ask that you contact the purchasing agent, not any contract administrator, not any guys that turn the wrench during that period. We want to make sure that all bidders are getting the same information. So we kind of limit that to us being able to answer those questions in purchasing. The tabulations will be posted out on IPS with the names of the bidders. Right now, the pricing is not posted after the bid opening. It's just the names of the bidders. After award, we go back and change that tabulation to add in the pricing so you see that after award. So it's updated in IPS and in EVP to show all of who's bid what after it's been approved to award. So we get these bids back, and now we've had our opening, and now we're going to evaluate. If it was a IFB, lowest bid, meeting specs, we just want to know how much money it is, and we might have asked for that contractor's license. So if that was a requirement, it's either a yes, no, was it there or was it not, we can award based on lowest cost meeting those requirements. The other two types of methods of evaluation are a best value weighted method, where we could ask for those different criteria. Of course, the three biggies are, what have you done in the past that's similar, who's doing the work, and how are you going to do the work? And we can assign a point value to it. Whatever the weighted method is will be spelled out in that solicitation. So we might put more weight to what have you done in the past. We might put more weight in how are you going to meet our deadlines. But however that point scale is, it will be laid out in section 3 of the RFP. So we call that a weighted evaluation, a scoring method. The other evaluation method we have is a narrative method, a best value method. And this is spelled out in the code of how we can award based on who still could ask for, what have you done in the past? Who's doing the work? How are you doing the work? It could ask all of those still evaluation criteria, and there can be multiple different things that could be in that criteria. But we use a narrative justification to award the contract. So we kind of look at the bids, how they come in, we compare them to each other, we document the strengths and the weaknesses of each proposal in each of those criteria to be able to say this vendor rose to the top because they provide us with the very best solution, and it's a trade-off on how much does it cost. If it's a weighted evaluation, we still assign point value to the cost. So cost is always a factor. It just could be not as much of a factor as the technical side of things and the evaluation criteria if we're doing a best value method. Whatever the method, whether it's just low cost, whether it's a weighted, whether it's a narrative method, it will be spelled out in that section 3 of how we plan to award and all of the documents that are associated with that. So if we are doing a best value narrative method, those strengths and weaknesses that are all documented. If we're doing a scored method, all those scores that we tally during that bid process all becomes part of that procurement file that after award then becomes public record. So we got lowest cost, numbers, and then we have the best value, which provides the very best solution to our problem. Also, part of a bid could be reference checks. So it could be a requirement that you submit them with your bid. And if we ask for 5, there better be 5. So if we ask for that, that could be a requirement that they're there, but then we could actually call those references. Most people are not going to give a bad reference, of course, but you'd be surprised. But we could call that vendor, and basically what we're doing is confirming that you said what you have done for that vendor and that the performance was up to par. We will ask those vendors, if we get around to doing the actual reference check, we will have a set of questions that we ask each one of those references the same questions. But look for in your solicitation documents that must provide, shall provide, shall be 5, should be 5 references. So look for those must, shall, and mandatory language within that solicitation document. Clarifications and backups, like I said, these happen and during the evaluation process. Requests for clarification are usually a yes, no. You are not changing anything in your proposal. We're not negotiating. We just got something back in your proposal that we didn't understand. So we might need a little more information to make sure that we understand what you put in your proposal. We can't ask you for additional information, like we're not going to ask you to change what you have in your technical scope, but maybe you said that you did this and we're not pretty sure what that is. Can you give me a little more information to know what that is? You cannot alter your proposal when you are asked for request for clarification. You cannot change your price. We can ask you to clarify your price. So if you told me that 5 widgets were $2 and your total price is $12, we might say 5 widgets are $2. So did you mean $10? Because you can't do math. Those things are either yes or no. There's a box there. You can provide some supplemental information, but we're not asking you to alter your proposal. If we get into negotiations or if we need to change something in your proposal, maybe your proposal maybe this solicitation had multiple phases of the task, and now all the bids have come back and we can only afford to do phase 1. We might go back and say, we need to negotiate. What is the price to just do phase 1? Or can we take out these tasks to then get under our price range and within our budget to be able to complete this project? You never know what those changes can be. There could be multiple changes. Maybe you did take those terms and conditions and exceptions to some of those that we need to clarify that we agree or don't agree or whatnot with those exceptions. Anytime we are altering your proposal, it is confirmed on a best and final offer document. So it is another document that we would send over email that you would actually execute, that you agree as well, and it becomes part of the total contract. We could say, we got all the bids back and we don't have the money for this, give us a better final offer. So that can happen too. We can get into negotiate with one vendor. We can negotiate with all vendors. We don't have to negotiate at all. So all the rules on negotiation are within the administrative code on how we follow those procedures for BAFOs. But the BAFO document is the document that confirms all those negotiations. Executive Order 50 is another one of those attachments that potentially could be attached to an IFB. And when I say IFB, it's because it is only attached for goods. It was set in place when Bev Perdue was the governor, and it allows North Carolina vendors to price match out-of-state vendors for the same commodity. So if you provide your proposal and you are within 5% or $10,000 of an out-of-state vendor for the same commodity, and you have opted and attached the Executive Order 50 to your proposal, we can reach out and say, you are now falling in this area. Do you want to match this out-of-state vendor to make sure we keep that taxpayer dollars within North Carolina? So there is an extra attachment. It's only attached to IFBs because it's only attached and it only qualifies for goods purchases. But if the vendor wants to participate in Executive Order 50, there is an attachment for that, and you have to be within 5% or $10,000 vendor. The purchasing office during the evaluation phase would say, hey, you said you want to participate in Executive Order 50. This vendor bid this for the exact same product. Do you want to price match their bid to be able to keep that dollars in North Carolina? We're going to get into the award process. So now you have gone through all that bid process. You've submitted all your stuff. You did all the site visits. You did everything. And now you've been awarded a bid. Awesome. All right. So we're going to notify you that you've been awarded. We're going to go through those different notifications. You're going to receive a purchase order through e-procurement. And then you're going to be able to say, hey, give me some money for all the stuff I did. So the award notification, you will get a certification of award from the department that outlines all of the specifics for the contract along with the executed contract. So it usually the certification of award just says, this is how much money the contract's for, this is what the term is, and hey, a purchase order is coming, and hey, now you can go talk to the guy that turns the wrench and set up your kickoff meeting. So now it's been awarded. We post that award out on IPS for the world to see, and then you should be accepting your purchase. You should be expecting your purchase order to be issued through e-procurement to the email address that you are registered in EVP. That award is posted to IPS within 3 days of us getting those final approvals. And like I said, it stays out there for 30 days, along with updating that tabulation now with what all the vendors bid is all out there for 30 days. When we move into the new system in July, it will now stay out there forever, whatever forever is. Once you get the contract award is received, you can now contact the contractor, the guy that turns the wrench, to set up roles, responsibilities, and have that kickoff meeting. When you get your purchase order through e-procurement, you should be on the lookout for a description of items or services, because when you invoice, you need to invoice directly with how the purchase order was issued. So if your shipping is separate because you want to not pay the 1.75 fee for that commodity code that's a service instead of a good, your purchase order should have 2 lines on it. It should have a line for the goods and a line for the shipping. It should match what's in your contract. So if there's an actual contract, if we're talking over $25,000, you have an RFQ, your RFQ executed contract should be attached to that purchase order within the system too. Look out for the comments, because there can be comments that says, hey, we don't have a loading dock. There's nowhere for you to drop your stuff off, so we need you to drop it off this place, or things like that. So it does have the ability that we can add comments, any external terms and conditions, any freight, delivery schedule, things like that. It also has the accounting codes. that are associated with that particular procurement. It can have the contract administrator's contact information also in those comments. So once you have your PO, you can then bill against it. Know that the payment of your invoice is going to the bill to address that is on the PO. So if you're physically getting a check, it will go to what you have in EBP, which is the bill to address on the PO. Make sure on your invoice you include the item description of services received. So it might in your contract say that you have to submit a report on what you've done or any of that kind of stuff that's in your contract. Make sure you submit that with your invoice per your contract. Also on your invoice, identify the purchase order number and the contract number. Make sure that sometimes when we have these contracts that are 1 year with optional renewals, you might get a purchase order for every year of that contract. Make sure you have the updated purchase order number on your invoice to make sure we're pulling that money from the correct PO. Ensure the remit to address is current on your EBP. Just know that the state typically pays net 30. And when I say net 30, that's from where you submitted your invoice to the guy that turns the wrench. He has approved the work. He gets it to fiscal accounting department to review and pay the invoice. On the norm, our fiscal office is awesome. And so they usually pay well more than 30 days. In state statute and state terms and conditions have 30 days to pay that invoice. So that know when you're doing stuff with the state, you have a net 30 that you're going to have to float. Once you've done the work, completed the work, and submitted your invoice, you could potentially have another 30 days. So just know that with doing business with the state, we pay net 30. Check writes are on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and the state does have the capability, because my God, it's 2023, to do electronic payments. So we do have that electronic fund transfer. This is the link to that to set up the EFT. You submit that to be able to get electronic transfer instead of waiting for a check. Let's skip this and head on. We're going to get into contract monitoring on the back end. So now you have this contract, you've gotten your awards, you've gotten your payment, you're going to submit your invoice, but we're going to talk about during the meantime of managing this contract, any inspections and testing, things that change, renewals, amendments. We're going to talk about vendor protests on the back end if you didn't get the contract, and then we're going to talk about this public records request. So good idea. Once you have a contract, especially something that has a term, start a kickoff meeting. If they don't contact you, if that guy that turns the wrench doesn't contact you, you contact them. Clarify any terms and conditions. Clarify any goals or objectives. Maybe now you have to go buy all of the equipment. Maybe now you have to go buy some supplies. Clarify all of that as to what's been done. Maybe you have to now do background checks, and there still potentially could be that you wouldn't pass a background check. All of that would be listed in the solicitation on how that contract works. But before you do anything, have a kickoff meeting with that contract administrator to make sure you know what your role, your responsibilities, who's doing what is all clarified. Because if you had some sales guy put in, he's not the technician that's actually the day-to-day guy, our people need to know that so that we make sure that it all works for everybody. So clarify those deliveries, expectations of when we should receive our stuff or when you should receive something. Maybe you're managing data. When do I get that data? When can we start this? All of those different kinds of things. Always a good idea. Have a kickoff meeting, get off on the right foot so everybody knows how the contract is supposed to work and is going to work. Know that there could be inspections. If there's inspections during the term of the contract, they should be spelled out in that contract management section. If there are reports, if there are things like that that are due, all of that would be under section 6 of that contract. Know that even if we were just getting a PO for buying widgets, we would notify you of damaged goods, inaccurate orders, or late shipments. Within e-procurement, once we give something and we have accepted it, we have to go into e-procurement and receive. Once that PO is received, that means that then you can invoice against it and we have received the product. Quality acceptance and inspection and delivery and installation. Just know that invoices cannot be paid until the agency completes the inspection or whatever the goods are to be completed. Can you still hear me? I think my headset's just died.
Yes, we can hear you. Yes,
Can you hear me?
yes.
Okay. Delivery is not to be considered done or to have occurred until installation is complete, and that's included clearing out the area and disposing of any waste. If there are vendor complaints during the term of a contract, know that the contract administrator will try to work directly with you to solve any of those vendor complaints. If they will send you things via writing, via email, in person, do your best to work with that contract administrator to make sure that you can get those complaints fixed. If they get to a point where they cannot get it fixed, they will contact the purchasing office to send you a formal vendor complaint with action to cure. Take that very seriously. To us, that means that the contract administrator has worked with you and they can't get resolved what they need resolved. So now they're coming to us and saying they're in breach of contract. And so that vendor letter will include an amount of time that you have to respond. It will include an action to fix the. Make sure that you can respond with, I don't agree with this. I don't agree. I've done this. You can respond with a rebuttal to that vendor complaint. Just know that you only have a certain amount of time to respond to that vendor complaint. You can say, yeah, I agree with these actions secure, and this is what I'm going to do to fix it. But all of that, you can request a meeting with whoever and say, no, I want to talk about this. We need to fix the problem. But we try our best to make sure that we want the contract to work for you and for us and to solve those problems, because we like doing business with good vendors and good vendors like doing business with us. Two types of things that happen for changes within the contract. Renewals, those are written ahead of time. So renewals are written and approved with the initial contract. Like I said, our standard contracts are 3 years. They can be longer. They just have to be approved up front. But some of those contracts are 1 year with 2 optional renewals, making a total of 3. If those renewals are those are optional, and it's up to us to exercise those options. The renewal agreement will be sent to the vendor to say, we want to use our renewal. Do you want to use our renewal? Sign this, and then we move forward. We issue that new purchase order for the next year of the contract. Know at the time of renewal, if you have any changes that you need to make to that contract, that's probably your best time to do it. So if all of a sudden you have some kind of tariff, or you have something that wasn't happening a year ago that now it's happening, you have the right to say, hey, I need to up my pricing for this renewal, but we don't have to agree to it. And we can say, no, we'd rather just put it out for bid. So know that those renewal agreements come well before your expiration. I think it says in most of the terms and conditions that we have to give you at least 30 days for that renewal agreement. Amendments or changes to a contract that's been established, any kind of change. So it could change those rates, it could change scope, it could change, maybe you were doing this project and you didn't get it done, and so you need an extra 3 months. It could be an extension, it could be changing costs, it could change anything, would be documented in an amendment. Only the purchasing office can change the terms of the contract. So if you have a guy that's doing landscape and he says, hey, I know you're cutting the trees, I'm gonna need you to take care of these ants. You'd be like, I don't take care of ants. That's not in my contract. Well, we can amend the contract, but you better call your office, because if it's not in the contract and you try to bill us for it, we're not paying for it. So make sure everything is documented. And if it's documented in that contract, that's what we're holding you to. So when we talk about vendor performance and vendor meeting the contract, we always refer to what is in writing in that contract as far as performance, payment, and everything else is what is in the contract. And then that's what we use as justification to either move forward or not. So if somebody asks you, yeah, just throw that on my bill, don't do it. Make sure to say, well, I need it in writing. So we talked about vendor protests. Let's say you did go out for bid and you don't agree with the award. Every vendor that bid has the right to protest an award. However, there are some stipulations. They are listed in that instructions to vendors attachment that is in the solicitation document. So one of the attachments is instructions to vendors. It goes over what to do with vendor protests. You must submit a written request to protest the bid. It needs to be sent to statewide procurement or statewide DIT procurement. It must be submitted within 30 consecutive calendar days from the award. So within that 30 days, if you want to protest an award, it needs to do that. All protest letters must contain why you're protesting and any supporting documentation for the protest. If you just want to see why it didn't do well, that's a public records request. But if you are actually protesting the award and you have documentation reasons for protesting the award, that's what would need to go into that protest letter that would be sent to the state procurement officer of PNC or the state procurement officer of DIT. So public records, we've talked about this all day. Use that to your advantage. Vendors are able to submit public records requests for awarded contracts. So you can submit public records requests to the agency that solicited the procurement. So most agencies have a web-based form. I know we have a web-based form. So if you go out to DOA and you just Google Department of Administration, you will get to the communications department. That's what you're looking for. And you can either contact the communications department directly, or most often there is a link that says, I want to submit a public records request. Just know the more information you get to them, the easier it is for them to find the record. The record holders are the department in which solicited for the product. So if it's a DPS solicitation, DPS is going to be the record holder. If it's a DOA, we are going to be the record holder. If it's a DOT procurement, they're going to be the record holder. Give us as much information as have. We buy a lot of stuff and we have a lot of bids to go through. So if you can give us who the awarded vendor is, what the contract number is, any kind of thing like that, it will help us find it quickly. Note that while a bid is out for bid, that only the pricing and who the awarded vendor is can be released. We can't release the whole packet of the actual contract. We can't release all the other bids that we got from the last time it was bid. What we can give you, and that's more of a question during the question answer period, while something is out for bid, is what are we currently paying and who is the current vendor. But outside of that, you can ask for, after something has been awarded, you can ask to see whatever. I would say that the procurement files are pretty big, so I would narrow it down to what you want to see. Most often, you probably want to see any evaluation documents, any award recommendation documents. That's going to give you the reason why they awarded the way that they awarded. That information is in the recommendation for award. So that's always the best document to get because all the information is kind of condensed. We send that to PNC or DIT, and then they approve on that.
This is your quick website resources. Can you hear me now, Carla? I think everything's bad now.
Yes, we can hear you. Okay.
All right. These are those websites. So this is statewide purchasing contract. That's where that's where the NC procurement manual is. That's where your access to the code is, all the mandated resources. It's also to their state term contracts. There's all kinds of information. The terms and conditions, the instructions to vendors, there's vendor forms, all those attachments where we ask for the financial condition, the reference checks, things like that are all found on their website. Same thing with statewide DIT procurement, their state term contracts and who those contract administrators are, and all that information are on their website. EVP is where you go to register. IPS is where you go to find those bid opportunities. E-procurement is where all that on the sourcing tool, on e-procurement, on the new EVP, on any questions on any of that. Hub certification, this is all the information to the hub office. Like I said, they have great opportunities. Check out their list of events. They also post for a lot of us that have given them, hey, these are coming. So they will post on their website. All of that is on the Hub website. So you can reach out directly to them. Then I believe that is it.